Thank you, Khadija, and thank you, John, for your wonderful words. And now I would like to introduce to you one of IPI's closest friends, a person who has dedicated his life to journalism, to practicing journalism, to defending press freedom, to supporting young journalists and ensuring that they have opportunities to learn and practice journalism. Without Simon and June, IPI would probably not exist today. Certainly the Lee Center for Global Journalism would not exist. And we would all not be here today, as Simon is the person who brought IPI and Columbia University together in 2019 to plan IPI's 70th anniversary here. So 3 years later, and after a global pandemic that disrupted our lives, we finally made it to Columbia. This is resilience. So it's wonderful to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, Simon Lee.
Good afternoon, Dean Cobb, members of the IPI board and IPI fellow IPI members, ladies and gentlemen. That's a hard act to follow, John and Khadija, but it's my great pleasure to add my voice of welcome to this. Thank you for coming to the campus of Columbia for this Congress. We are grateful to President Bollinger, Dean Cobb, his predecessor as Dean, Steve Cole, for their hospitality and support. The university and the school are co-sponsoring this Congress. And also to Janine Jacquet, who was Associate Dean at the Graduate School of Journalism and has now been promoted to the university's Alumni and Development Office, for her hard work, without which this would not have happened. And then for those of you who came from abroad, extra thanks for braving the distances and the hardships of COVID-era travel, especially the hurdles of obtaining your visas. It's a trial I shared 53 years ago, trying to come here to be a student at the journalism school, and I know it's only gotten far worse. So it was on this campus that I began my life in America, and it was also here that IPI began its life, as John has told you. But for COVID, we would have been here 2 years ago. Well, we are also marking that occasion, but marking the 70th anniversary of IPI's first Congress, held in Paris in 1952. So in October of 1950, 15 senior newspaper editors from 13 countries were given a tour of America. They met President Truman in the White House, and they visited 5 cities around the country. And after what they saw and what they learned and the discussions they had, they came back here to the journalism school and met with 19 of their American counterparts. And out of this was born the IPI. The mission those 34 editors defined for the IPI was to promote and safeguard press freedoms, the free flow of news and information, and to improve the practice of journalism. As Lester Markell, who was then editor of the Sunday New York Times, expressed it, there is a requirement on all of us to advance the cause of journalism wherever it is practiced. We should strive to correct the distortions and to dispel the fogs that cloud the relations among countries. We should do our utmost toward that end, for our own sake, for all our sakes, all our nations, for the sake of the world. Since then, IPI has grown into a truly global network of editors, publishers, and journalists who believe in the importance of independent journalism, of a journalism that serves the public interest, and who are convinced that we must work together to create the conditions that journalists need to operate freely, serving their important watchdog function. So 7 decades after its creation, IPI is as much needed today as ever. In a world where new forms of journalism proliferate and the very word journalist is hard to define, the values IPI professes and promotes are unchanging. A commitment to facts, to independence, to accuracy and fairness, to serving the public interest, and to ensuring that journalism is as diverse and inclusive as it can be. But the challenges and hardships for independent journalism are immense. Shockingly, in an American context, last Saturday, an investigative reporter of 40 years was stabbed to death in Las Vegas. And I hesitated to mention this because at first we didn't know anything about the possible perpetrator or motives. Well, this morning, authorities in Clark County around Las Vegas charged a county administrator with the murder of Jeff Sherman. So it looks like exactly the sort of violence that we fear and abhor and that threatens journalists so much more often elsewhere. And the recipients of IPI's awards at this Congress also highlight vividly these dangers. The Palestinian American journalist for Al Jazeera, Shireen Abu Akleh, shot to death in May while covering an Israeli raid on a refugee camp. She was one of at least 30 journalists around the world killed so far this year. And in her case, as with the majority of the almost 900 journalists slain in the last 10 years, no one has been held to account. Carlos Dada, who has dedicated his professional life to investigating corruption in Central America, refusing to be intimidated in a region where journalists are killed, attacked, and threatened to silence them. And 7 independent media in Ukraine, in recognition for their courageous and tenacious coverage of the ongoing war, for their adaptability and great risk-taking to ensure that the people of Ukraine and the world have access to a variety of independent, accurate news sources. And of course, as mentioned 3 days ago, the action taken by a Russian court in stripping Novaya Gazeta of its license to publish. For over these 7 decades, IPI has been actively alerting the world about attacks against journalists and other efforts to silence their voices. It has entered into dialogue with governments and legislators to bring about positive change or to hold them accountable for their violations of press freedom. Even as it has worked with its members and others to mitigate these threats, it has also directly supported journalists with training, the exchange of skills, and even financial support. IPI's important work is made possible by the membership fees we pay, the donations we give, and the active support we provide it. The excellent work of its staff is amplified by the global network of its members. So I urge you to participate actively and to contribute, all the more so if you are in a place where your freedom to practice journalism is unhindered, or at least easier and safer, protected by the rule of law. This call to action is particularly directed towards my American colleagues. Of course, there are challenges here too, as in the case probably of the Las Vegas killing. But we are relatively so privileged. Yet I have been sad to see a time when what was once the largest membership of IPI, at the time when I joined in 1995, had for many years become one of the smallest. Things are better now. Our membership model was heavily based on the so-called legacy media, with those dead, dying, or under huge financial stress. It turns out there has been little legacy. So we must step forward as individuals. It is on an individual level too that we here at this Congress and in Congresses before can enjoy one of IPI's best benefits, the opportunity to forge connections and friendships among colleagues from around the world. Such links have a great potential to foster understanding and break down barriers among peoples. That in turn can only improve the quality of our journalism, a vital part of IPI's mission. This Congress is significant for IPI, not only for the symbolism of returning to its birthplace, but because it is the first full-fledged Congress in more than 2 years of the global pandemic. It renews those opportunities for networking and for exchanging views about the challenges of journalism today and how to meet them. For me, our presence on this campus is especially meaningful. It merges two institutions that I and my wife have consistently supported, believing them both to be vital for the health of our occupation. I am back at the school that changed the course of my life profoundly. It was the J School, as we alumni like to call it, that afforded me the opportunity for a life in the United States. It was the J School that taught me the skills and reinforced the values that served as a foundation of my career. And it is the J School that has adapted constantly to equip tomorrow's journalists with the tools to do ever more incisive work with the tools that are being developed all the time. Yet instills in them the unchanging values that underlie quality journalism. Earlier, I acknowledged that the US media scene has its own problems. Much as our focus is on a lack of local reporting, unquestionably a very important issue. But ever since I arrived on these shores 53 years ago, I have felt that the paucity of international news was also important, especially for a superpower so much out in the world, but often with not enough knowledge and humility. So it has been a mission of my working life, especially in the 16.5 years I spent at the Los Angeles Times International News Desk, more of 7 of those as foreign editor, to work towards mitigating that insufficiency. The radical losses to legacy media have worsened the drought as drastically as climate change has cut rainfall in Southern California, where my wife and I live. That is why I'm very grateful to the J School for working with June and me to establish the Simon and June Center for Global Journalism and appointing the amazingly accomplished Azmat Khan, a winner of this year's Pulitzer for International Reporting. It should be entitled International Investigative Reporting. She is appointed to shape the center and head it. The center shares with IPI the mission to increase international understanding through the cross-fertilization of journalists, equip Americans venturing abroad to report with the tools, ideally to follow Azmat's amazing example, and journalists from abroad to come here both to sharpen their skills and to learn more about the United States and Americans. So I wish you a successful and enjoyable Congress. Make the most of the opportunities it presents. Renew the resolution that IPI's founders embraced, that by working together across borders, we can improve the practice of journalism, protect and fortify free journalism, free press, and advance the understanding among peoples. Thank you.